We learned a lot this weekend about how Osama Bin Laden ran al-Qaeda and ran away from the United States. We also learned a lot about how conservatives are still stuck in the past, fighting the wrong war with the wrong tools. First, the Bin Laden tapes. New videos found at the compound show and involve Bin Laden recording new orders for his followers. They even showed Bin Laden monitoring TV coverage of himself. Looks kind of sad there, just missing the Cheetos to go along with that picture. U.S. officials say the amount of material recovered from the compound could fill a small college library. They also say intelligence gathered during the raid shows Bin Laden ran a, quote, active command and control center for al-Qaeda. As President Obama said on 60 Minutes, this was a huge victory.
We've got the opportunity, I think, to really finally defeat at least al-Qaeda in that border region between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The one thing I didn't lose sleep over was the possibility of taking Bin Laden out. Justice was done.
Of course, the Bin Laden we found is a far cry from the isolated, irrelevant man hiding in a cave that was described by the Bush administration.
I don't know where he is, nor, I just don't spend that much time on him, Kelly, to be honest with you. And, again, I don't know where he is. I repeat what I said. I truly am not that concerned about him.
The smirk always drives me crazy in that clip. It's Bin Laden you're talking about. The Bush administration had been claiming that Bin Laden was barely relevant since al-Qaeda wasn't taking direct orders from him anymore. Of course, as usual, it turns out they were totally wrong about that. They might have wanted to downplay Bin Laden's relevance since they never caught him. But now that President Obama has, they want the credit anyway, which is pretty amusing to watch.
President Bush had to make some very, very hard calls that frankly helped to set this up.
All of the work he did and the changes he made in intelligence brought this about.
The sour grapes are everywhere. Former Bush Chief of Staff Andy Card said, quote, I think Obama has pounded his chest a little too much. He can take pride in it, but he does not need to show it so much. You kidding me? Pounding his chest? That's from the guy who was part of the team that brought us the infamous Mission Accomplished banner? You wouldn't call that pounding your chest? And by the way, they bragged way before they got the job done. They spiked the ball at their own 20-yard line. Did I score? Did I score? No, you're 80 yards away. This debate isn't just about politics. Look, it matters because it's a fight about how do you use American power. President Obama has just made a convincing case for smarter wars and more targeted military action, and I think he's proven his case. Joining us now is Howard Dean, former DNC chairman and former governor of Vermont. Governor Dean, great to have you here.
Cenk, thanks for having me.
All right. First, look, there was a lot of things that the Bush administration now wants to take credit for. They said that he was irrelevant. That turns out not to be true. They said President Obama was bragging too much. They talked about how torture was the right way to go. None of that turns out to be true. But what do you think was the largest failure of the Bush administration in terms of strategy that did not work in getting Bin Laden or accomplishing the war on terror?
Well, look, I mean, I think we can spend time on the Bush administration. They did make an enormous number of mistakes, and unfortunately, humility is not their strong suit. But I think most Americans want to look forward. This is a huge win for the president. It's actually a huge win for the country, which makes the Bush people look bad. I know Andy Card well, and I like him, and I'm very disappointed to hear him say that. This is about the country. This isn't about President Obama. This is about some incredibly brave troops, some really smart planning. Of course, President Obama, as the president, he gets the credit he deserves for making this very tough call. The toughest thing about this call for the president, who was not going to risk his life in Abbottabad, which was the political ramifications. He screws this up, and he's in big trouble. And it was a gutsy call because a lot of things could have gone wrong with this operation. He did something that I think was really important. He waited patiently until he knew it was Obama. There was a good chance of it being Obama, and then he could document the fact that, Osama, and there was a good chance that he could document that Osama was in fact dead. And of course, then they got this treasure trove of documents. So look, I think the president did this very, very well. I think the Bush people really are exhibiting sour grapes, and it's unbecoming. And knowing what I know about President Bush, he himself would not approve of the kind of behavior of some of the people around him. The president, I think, is a classy guy, President Bush, and I think that he understands what's good for the country, and this is not about politics.
Governor Dean, I want to reiterate that to me, it's not about the politics. It's about what do we get right, what do we get wrong, and what can we learn from that for the future, as you said. So now, obviously, we got some things right here. So what's your sense of what we learned from this mission and what we've done over the last 10 years?
Well, first of all, the wrong thing to do was to have massive interventions in places like Iraq. That had nothing to do with the war on terror. It was a huge mistake. What we see now is the Iraqis are becoming a vassal state of the Iranians, carrying out their bidding, shooting innocent civilians. This is not going to have a happy ending. We need to come home. We will come home at the end of the year, and we're not going to leave something that's going to look much like a democracy as we know it. That was a huge mistake that the Bush people made. The right way to do this is to have targeted intervention with terrorist groups. We've been doing that. In fairness, the Bush people did some of that too. We were not the first to use drones, but the drones have been very, very successful. We are going to need to get out of Afghanistan, and we're going to get out of Afghanistan sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, our allies in Afghanistan are corrupt and inept, and you can't work with people. It's very much like Vietnam. When you have a corrupt government that you're trying to work with, you can't succeed if the government itself doesn't want to succeed. But when we get out, we know now, because of the bravery of our troops and the expertise in our armed forces and our intelligence, that we probably will continue to be able to control the threat from al-Qaeda using drones and special ops, even though Afghanistan will not be friendly territory.
So, Governor Dean, I understand you switched positions on Afghanistan recently. Tell me about that, why you think the facts on the ground necessitated a switch.
Well, the reason I supported President Obama's expansion of troops in Afghanistan is I thought there was only a small chance that we could prevail there, but I'm deeply concerned about the plight of women in Afghanistan. The women of Afghanistan are going to be back in the status of 12th century slaves when we leave. The Afghan culture is barbaric towards women, stoning them, raping them as punishment, banning them from school. It's a disgrace. What turned me finally against sending more troops and in favor of getting our troops home as soon as possible was not so much the corruption of President Karzai, but a statement he made basically saying that women did not deserve equal rights, and in fact they should be very limited in what they're allowed to do. And I began to think, what is the true difference here between Hamid Karzai and the Taliban? Yes, the Taliban have been hostile to the United States. I think they've learned their lesson. I think they understand that if they harbor people who are dangerous to us, we will go back and take them out if necessary. So why are we propping up this corrupt government that won't even stand up for its own women? If that's the case, why are we there? And so I began to realize that it wasn't that our troops couldn't succeed in Afghanistan. It was without a government of Afghanistan that was a reasonable partner, it was unfair to expect American troops to try to turn the country around.
Now there's bipartisan opposition to staying in Afghanistan longer. We've got 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats that just came out on it today, led by Peter Welch, who's a Democrat of Vermont, your home state, and Jason Chaffetz, a Republican of Utah. Was it a mistake to think that we could rebuild a nation or even perhaps change their culture, especially by military means?
Well, look, Cenk, here's how it works. We needed to go into Afghanistan. I supported President Bush when he went into Afghanistan. I did not support him in going into Iraq, but I did into Afghanistan. They had killed 3,000 of our people. They had harbored people who murdered 3,000 American civilians. So we had both a right and a necessity to go in to defend American security interests. Once we get there, we find this very unstable, essentially 12th century society, and it is an opportunity for nation building. There will be those who argue the Bush administration dropped the ball. They were in 2 places at once. We shouldn't have been in Iraq. We should have done better in Afghanistan. I think probably a lot of that's true. The fact is that we weren't able to nation build because we weren't able to find a partner that was honest, straightforward, and had the best interests of his nations at heart. Karzai probably stole the last election. The first election he was elected reasonably and thoughtfully and was a good partner for a while. But I think that his family has embezzled billions of dollars out of the Afghan National Bank and sent it to Dubai. There's a lot of discussion about one of his brothers being a big drug dealer. These are not people that you eventually build nations with. America can never build another nation unless we have partners in that nation who want to build it. And I think we lack those partners.
All right. Howard Dean, as always, thank you for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
And joining me now is retired General Wesley Clark, former NATO commander and now chairman of West Clark and Associates. General Clark, great to have you as well.
Thank you, Cenk. Good to be with you.
Now, I was just talking to Governor Dean about his position switch in Afghanistan. I actually went through the same thing. It's because it's been nearly 10 years. It's not the same war that we started with. We started with a war that was to get al-Qaeda. Well, you know, there's about 50 to 100 al-Qaeda left in Afghanistan, if our intelligence is correct. We just killed bin Laden. Is this an entirely different war, and should we get out of it?
Well, first of all, we couldn't get out of it until we got Osama bin Laden. So that's the precondition for the exit strategy. I think we've got three tasks right now. Number one is we've got to finish the job against al-Qaeda. We've got a whole lot of information that's got to be exploited. It's not only worldwide, it's also localized in Pakistan and maybe in Afghanistan. So don't pull any punches on al-Qaeda at this point. Number two, I think we need to do as much as we can to push ourselves into a posture that we've got a reasonable chance to get some kind of a diplomatic agreement that will provide minimum rights for the people of Afghanistan and some assurance to us diplomatically and legally that we don't have to stay there to enforce our counterterrorism strategy, and maybe it will authorize us to come back in if necessary. So that's the second piece. The third piece is I think we need to get our mission transitioned from forces into something more entrepreneurial. I don't know why American business can't go in there. The Chinese are in there. They're mining copper. There's oil. There's copper. There's all kinds of minerals. Afghanistan someday is going to be a very wealthy place. Our soldiers have lost their lives there. We put our blood and treasure on the line there, and I think we should get something out of that. But we've got to structure that and get in there and get it done.
Well, that's interesting. I'm much more worried about getting our troops out, honestly, than I am about.
Well, I think you have to, but Cenk, I think you have to take a big. I think you have to take a big picture on this thing. Pakistan is going to align with China against India. India is going to continue to maintain its effort inside Afghanistan to use that as a block between China and Pakistan. So this geostrategic rivalry is not going to go away. So we may not be playing militarily, but we have a vital interest in engaging both India and China. We don't want to see war there between any of the parties, but we also don't want to see innocent people killed or intimidated. The United States has global interests, and we can't simply say we got Osama bin Laden, okay, lights out, we're leaving, and let it go back the way it was. That's the mistake we made in 1989. We're not going to make it again, I hope.
And General Clark, when you look at how we got bin Laden and what we did in Afghanistan for 10 years, let alone Iraq, etc., can't we learn the lesson, though, that these giant wars are not the way to go? I mean, can you imagine if instead of sending in 24 Navy SEALs into Pakistan, we realized bin Laden's in Pakistan, so we invaded the country? I mean, these wars don't seem to make any sense. Aren't these surgical strikes the much better way to go?
Well, they are if you can get the intelligence. We do have technologies that we didn't have, let's say, in Vietnam, and so we are able to make these so-called surgical strikes. By the way, they're not too surgical probably if you're on the ground, but and feeling the impact of it. But this is a really tough mission. Our SEALs did a great job, and it's absolutely the way to go. And it's the way we should think about going if we have to come back into Afghanistan. It's the way we should have gone against Osama bin Laden long ago had we had the intelligence, not with major invasions, but by going after the people who are taking shelter in hapless states like Afghanistan was in 2001.
General, one more question about Pakistan, because that's a tough nut to crack. You know, right now they're saying, oh, you violated our sovereignty, how dare you, there's going to be consequences. One of their papers just outed one of our CIA officials, apparently. They tried to get the top guy, they got the wrong name, etc. But obviously, they're very mad about what went down. What do you do with a problem like Pakistan?
Well, I think you try to continue to work the problem. I don't think it does us any good to leave Pakistan and say, you're on your own again, we don't like you. I mean, it's a nation of 175 million people. It's got nuclear weapons. It's on a geostrategic fault line. It's going to cause mischief in the region. It does harbor international terrorists. I think what we showed the Pakistanis is basically that the United States is powerful enough and has the resolve to take action in self-defense to protect ourselves if Pakistan won't or can't. And I think it should be a wake-up call to Pakistan. But having said that, I think they've got to accept it as that, and we've got to continue to work with Pakistan. We have every reason in the world to continue to work with them, but this is a wake-up call for Pakistan. No more fooling around. When we say we mean it, now they understand we mean it.
Yeah, in the past we only had carrots. Now it appears we have carrots and sticks. So that's the way the world works.
Yep.
General
it does
Wesley
work
Clark.
that way. Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Cenk. Thank you.